Ben and Me, Chapter 11, At Court. Our voyage at last ended, although I was too far gone to know or care. By the time I had recovered, we were comfortably lodged in a house at Passy, a small town on the outskirts of Paris. Ben, for some uncountable reason, proved to be tremendously popular with the French people. Scholars, scientists, and writers flocked to the house. They hung on his every word and talked of his lightning rods and kite flying as though they were something wonderful. Pictures of him were sold in all the shops, while his maxims were quoted everywhere. In French, of course. To me, they made even less sense in French than in English. As for the admiration of the French ladies, it was just plain silly. They swarmed around him like flies around a honey jar, and they called him papa, and they used to cry if he refused their invitation to tea or dinner. Our mail was filled with their ridiculous notes, all highly perfumed. Some of the ladies went so far as to copy the untidy way in which he wore his hair, while others wore fur caps made in imitation of Ben's. One of them even tried to borrow my home for her milliner to copy. I put a stop to that promptly. We were surrounded by diplomats, politicians, and spies, all of whom were trying to find out what Ben was doing in France, and, if possible, to prevent him from accomplishing it. Naturally, I was kept extremely busy watching all these people and telling Ben what they were up to. I became familiar with the desk of page 76, Ambassador in Paris, read each one's mail and listen to all their conversations. Of course, with the information I supplied, Ben was able to thwart every plot against us, thereby gaining the reputation of being a brilliant diplomat. While I worked myself to a shadow, he was growing fat on all this attention, not to mention the dinners he continually attended. He did do his part at court, however. The king and queen were just as silly as the rest of the French in their admiration for Ben, his maxims, and his quaint clothing. They especially liked the fur cap, which, of course, he wore everywhere. By flattery and smooth-tongued promises, he managed to borrow millions of francs for General Washington and his ragged army. As long as he secured these vast sums for the cause of liberty and justice, I didn't mind how ridiculous he made himself, but the sociability was wearing me down. Ben, I said finally, I've just been thinking of one of your maxims. He that goes a-borrowing goes a-sorrowing. Now here you've come on one of the biggest borrowing expeditions in the age, but where's the sorrowing? You've borrowed millions from the King of France, and you're still the most carefree old rapscallion I've ever seen. Every evening it's dinner with Madame this and Countess that. Fools make feasts and wise men eat them, says he. All right, I said, all right. I won't try to match maxims with you, but this dinner thing is wearing me out, especially that Madame Helvetus, she and her cats. She has many important people at her dinners, he protested. She also has cats, I said. Dozen of cats, all over the house, and that pesky little yapping dog. My nerves are on edge all the time I'm there, Ben. I just can't stand much more of it. Besides, suppose something horrid were to happen to me. How could you get along? What would happen to our mission, to our army, to General Washington? Ben looked thoughtful. There is much more in what you say, Amos. Forewarned is forearmed. Moreover, I dislike those cats as much as you do, and for the dog, yes, you are right, Amos. It is too grave a risk. From now on, we must, top of page 78, dine less often with Madame Helvetus, and more often perhaps with Madame Brion? Now, I said, you show some glimmer of sense. If we must dine out all the time, let it be Madame Brion, by all means. There's a lady for you. Not a cat in the entire house. Good food, too. So to my great relief, we ceased our visits to Madame Helvetus and her cats, dining several times a week with Madame Brion. This suited me perfectly, for in addition to the good food and charming surroundings, there was Sophia. Sophia was a beautiful white mouse from the court of Versailles, an aristocat and a lady, if I ever saw one, a lady in distress, as soon as I learned. She lived in Madame Brion's towering headdress, which made a really dainty home, very different from my rough frontier cabin type of residence. During the long, tiresome dinners, we visited back and forth a great deal. Her English was excellent, for she was beautifully educated, so we were able to converse freely. Having spent most of my life in the company of rather lowly church and tavern mice, I found her brilliant mind and delightful manners a revelation. I soon became her devoted admirer and slave. Well, had she need of an agile mind and a strong right arm, for she had been a victim of the most villainous intrigues and persecution by the white mice of the court. The story of her wrongs, which she unfolded to me, is too long to be set forth here. It is enough to say that as a result of a foul conspiracy, her husband, a member of one of the oldest mouse families in France, had been exiled to America, where she herself had been obliged to flee from the court, leaving their seven children captives at Versailles. Her poor husband was now in Philadelphia, struggling violently to make a home in the New World for his family, should they ever be reunited. Sophia was banished from the court, had sought refuge with Madame Brionne, whose kindness to the unfortunate was well known. Here, in her protector's great white wig, Sophia served her in much the same capacity that I did Ben. As adviser and confidant, she was of the greatest value to her patroness, and since Madame Brionne often attended the court, Sophia was able occasionally to secure news of her children's welfare. Page 80. Although never able to see them, she learned that they were held in a small cell directly beneath the queen's throne. Her one desire in life was now to rescue these unfortunate young ones and join her husband in America, but the task seemed well nigh hopeless. Not only was I touched by her beauty and helplessness, but all my Republican sympathies cried out against these wicked injustices by the pampered aristocrats of a dissolute court. "Madam," I cried, "do not despair. Though of humble birth, I have played no small part in the affairs of men and nation. What a mouse can do, I will. I, Amos, solemnly swear never to rest until your wrongs are righted and you are happily joined with your children and husband in a beautiful city of Philadelphia, USA." Tears filled the beautiful pink eyes at my words. "Oh, Monsieur Amos," she said softly, "could you but accomplish this, what happiness would you bring to a bereft family?" "Fear not, madame," I said. "To a true son of liberty and justice, such a task is a mere nothing. Have courage and trust in Amos."